Hello, Mountain View kids and families. This is Mrs. Martha coming to you again from my living room. This video is going to be for Sunday, May 24th, 2020. I just want to remind you, here is my email, kids@mountainviewcc.org, and please email me. I can take if you have a prayer request, if you have any comments on the videos you'd like to share with me. Also, you can sign up so that you can get on my weekly email and get all of the downloads that I have for you of all the worksheet pages that go along with today's lesson. You can also go to Cokesbury Kids on Facebook. They have a live Sunday school on Facebook Live on Sunday mornings, as well as the videos for the stories that we're going to be doing. They also have a link there to the downloads, so you can get it there. So that's Cokesbury Kids on Facebook. All right, so make sure too that you have subscribed to our Mountain View Kids Fontana YouTube channel. So like, subscribe, and share our videos. That would be great. We've been getting more likes and views on YouTube than we actually have kids coming to our Sunday school. So I know that there's kids out there watching this who may not regularly be coming to our Sunday school. So I'm really excited to see that. Our Bible verse for May is still Acts 4:20. So I'm going to read it and you can say it along with me. As for us, we can't stop speaking about what we have seen and heard, from Acts 4:20. And remember, this is Peter and John who said that they had been arrested for sharing the gospel, talking about Jesus. And even though they had been told to stop talking about Jesus, they said, we can't do that. We have to keep talking about him. And that's going to go along a little bit with today's lesson that we're going to be having today. Remember that my Sunday school is coming from the Deep Blue One Room Sunday School program produced by Abingdon Press. You can also get the Deep Blue app on the App Store, and that has the weekly video that you can watch of the story. It's got the Bible verse and some games for the kids to do. So make sure to get that Deep Blue app. It's free, and then you can follow along with that as well. Today's story is coming from Acts chapter 9, verses 20 through 25, and the name of our lesson is Paul Escapes. So we've got, I'm going to have you show you the craft first, because the craft is something that you can have, and then as you listen to the story, you can use the craft. And today we're going to be making Paul in a basket. So I'm going to show you how you can make that. So when you download this, you can print it out, and then you can cut out the little figure of Paul, which I've already done here. And then these are the things that you're going to need. You're going to need another lunch bag as well. You're going to need a hole punch, if you've got one of those, and some yarn. I couldn't find any yarn, but I did find some ribbon, so anything like that will work to help you do the craft. So to do the craft, you're first going to take your paper bag, and you're going to cut off some of the top of it. It's pretty tall. I actually didn't quite cut it off. I could have cut it off a little bit shorter, but you just cut it so it's not quite so big, so it makes a little basket for Paul. Then you're going to fold down just about an inch down, and that will just kind of reinforce the top, make it a little bit sturdier. Then with your hole punch, you're going to punch holes all the way around. I've already done that just to save some time. And you're going to want to make sure on the sides that you've got a hole right in the middle of each side, and then you can just punch it all the way around. Then you're going to take your yarn, or in my case my ribbon, and you're going to lace it through, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So you want to go from the inside to the outside. So for my first end, I'm going to thread it through here all the way through it. This is kind of long. You can give yourself kind of a long piece of yarn, and then you can always trim it down if you cut it too long. Then I'm taking some tape here, and I'm just going to tape the end of the yarn to the bag like that, and that way when I start lacing it, the end isn't going to pull through. And then as you lace it at the end here, you go, I went from the inside to the outside, and now I'm going to go over the top and back through the inside, from the inside to the outside. Pull it all the way through. And then I've got a little lace here, and then I'm going to do that again, go over the top on the end here, and go from the inside to the outside. And then I'm going to do that all the way around. I'm not going to do that now, but you can lace it like that all the way around the whole bag. Just remember to go over the top and from inside to outside. Then with your other piece of yarn, you can cut it into, or you can keep it one length, and you're going to tie it to that middle hole on the side. And you can just do an easy little tie. You don't have to do a fancy knot. Get that through. You can just do a little knot here to tie it. And then you'll take the other end. This is too long, but you can take the other end and tie it through the other side. Do that real quick. Get that through. Get that tied here. A little bigger here. Tie that through. Now, it's a little long, but the idea is that you can hold it by that and hang it down, and then you're going to put your paw into your basket, and then when we get to that point in the story, you'll see why Paul is in a basket that is being hung. Most of you already know this story. So that's our craft for today. So if you want to make that, and then if you want to stop the video, make your craft, and then you can have it ready for the story when we get to that. So that will be on the download here, and it's got all the instructions there showing you how to make your pole in a basket. All right, now I'm going to start with the story. So last week's story, we talked about how Paul got converted on the road to Damascus, which was a city about 185 miles away from Jerusalem. So it was a little far distance for him. It was a journey. The Bible doesn't say whether he walked or whether he rode a donkey, but it was a little bit of a journey. And as he was on the road to Damascus, he got stopped by a bright light and a voice speaking to him, which he recognized as the voice of Jesus. And God spoke to him and told Paul to stop persecuting the Christians, and that Jesus really was God. And so Paul instantly realized his mistake. He went into the city of Damascus. He was actually blinded by the light for 3 days. A man named Ananias was sent by God, and he laid his hands on him, and Paul was able to see again. And Paul immediately started preaching in the city of Damascus, going into the synagogues and telling people about Jesus. Paul was about 30 years old at this time, so he was still a pretty young man at this time before he started his ministry. We also remember in my Bible, at this time, he's still called Saul. That Saul was his Jewish name, and later he becomes called by Paul, which was the Greek version of his name. And Saul was actually part Greek and part Jewish. He was actually a Roman citizen because he was born in a city that was a Roman-controlled area. And that gave him some privileges, which he was able to use later on in his ministry. So I'm going to start reading here from Acts chapter 9, and this is verse 20. Soon he began to preach about Jesus in the synagogues, saying, Jesus is the Son of God. So he went out to the Jewish synagogues, which was their church, their temple, where they worshiped, and he started telling people, all the Jews that he had been persecuting, that he believed in Jesus. All the people who heard him were amazed. They said, this is the man who was in Jerusalem. He was trying to destroy those who trust in this name. He came here to do the same thing. He came here to arrest the followers of Jesus and take them back to the leading priests. But Saul became more and more powerful. His proofs that Jesus is the Christ were so strong that the Jews in Damascus could not argue with him. So Paul had a bad reputation. He was well known as being somebody who was trying to kill the Jews, and that word had come ahead of him to Damascus. All the Jews there already knew who he was. They already knew that he was not a friend of the Christians, and they were rather rightly concerned about him. And so there were some Jews that believed that he actually was saved, and there were some who did not believe that. And that happens a lot when we get saved. Sometimes we have some friends that knew us before, and sometimes they don't believe it. And we have to have our lives showing the change that God has made in us so that people can really see what God has done in us. So he had that little bit of a bad reputation, but it said his proofs were so strong that many Jews did believe him. But something happened. After many days, the Jews made plans to kill Saul. So they not only didn't believe in him, some of them, but they were so concerned about him that they decided they needed to kill him, get him out of the way, because he was rapidly becoming dangerous, as much of a threat as Peter and John, who had been arrested, so they wanted to kill him. They were watching the city gates day and night. They wanted to kill him, but Saul learned about their plan. Now, they've mentioned here the city gates. Today in our cities, we don't have city gates. Our cities are just a bunch of houses and buildings, and here in Southern California, our cities just are one right after another. You can't even tell when you leave one city and go to another one. If we go a little farther out, maybe toward the desert or up into the Central Valley, the towns become more spread out, and you might have a town with maybe some desert or some farmland around it, and then you go a little ways and there may be another town. But in Bible times, a lot of cities had walls around them. I'm going to show you a picture here of it's actually a picture of Jericho, which is from another Bible story with city walls. But this gives you an idea of what a walled city looked like. And these were almost all the ancient towns had walls around them. In this case, Jericho, you can see, actually has a double wall around it. Now, the cities were very small at the time. Jerusalem, which was the capital and probably one of the biggest cities at the time, was only about 1 mile long and about 3/4 of a mile wide. So about the size of my neighborhood. It really small. You think of it as being really big, but the cities were very small. They were just full of houses and buildings, and then they were surrounded by these walls. Now, the walls were very big. They were often very thick, sometimes as much as 9 feet thick, which is really thick, and maybe 12, 13, 14 feet high. So very tall and thick. In fact, they were so thick that you could actually walk around on top. You can't really see in the picture here, but because they were so thick, you could walk on top. And of course, that was convenient because then if somebody came and tried to attack your town, you could go up on that wall and you could fling things down at them like boiling oil, or you could shoot arrows down at them. And so that was kind of important as a way to protect their city. And the cities had gates. Sometimes maybe only one gate, or maybe they might have 2 or 3 gates on the different sides. And these were big wooden doors, and they would shut, like 2 doors shutting like that. And then they would actually do something that they would call as barring it. They would put a pole on the inside, and that made it strong enough so that if somebody tried to come in and attack the city, it was difficult for them to get in. So a lot of people lived inside the city, and there were also people who lived outside the city, the farmers, and of course all the sheep and the goats and the cattle were on farmland outside the city. But anytime there was any danger, somebody coming to the city that they were afraid might attack them, then all the people who lived outside the city would run into the city, they would shut that gate, and then the people inside would be pretty safe from attack. So this is a walled city. And Damascus, where Paul was also a walled city. Now, in some places, too, they actually, you can kind of see in the picture, the houses were actually built right against the city wall. And so if you had a house, you might have a window that looked out through the wall. So some of the houses had windows, obviously fairly high up, so you can climb in and out. and they would have a window, and then you could have some light into your house that was built on the against the side of the city wall. And that's what is happening in our story here. So the Jewish people were watching that city gate because there was only a few gates at the city. They could put people at the gate, and then they could watch everybody coming in and out. And that way they thought, we'll just catch Paul as he's going in and out. It'll be easy to catch him, and then we can arrest him, and then we can kill him. But Paul learned about their plan. Obviously, that was God. One night, some followers of Saul helped him leave the city. They lowered him in a basket through an opening in the city wall. So they actually found a house that had a window as part of that city wall. They found a big basket. So our basket's just a little representation of that. Obviously, it must have been a pretty big basket because Paul was able to sit in it. And they tied it probably to some ropes, and they got him out the wall, and then they lowered the basket down the wall. I've got an old picture here you can see. This is actually from the 12th century, so this is about a 900-year-old picture. I'll hold it close here. This is a tapestry that somebody wove, and it shows Paul in a basket there being lowered outside the city walls. So the walls weren't terribly high. They were maybe, like I said, 12 or 14 feet high, but through the opening, so they were able to get him outside the basket through this opening in the wall, far away from the city gate, and so he was able to get down in the basket, get to the ground, and run away, and he managed to escape those Jewish people that were trying to kill him. And of course, this was all part of God's plan. Paul had just barely started preaching. God had this big plan for him to share the gospel with much of the known world, the civilized world at that time. And so God allowed Paul to escape, and he went away for a while and then was able to return later. And start his preaching. So that's our story today. It's got a little bit of exciting action in it, as we can imagine that these people were trying to kill him, and Paul finds out and makes a narrow escape and is able to be saved to do God's work later. So the point we want to learn from this story is that Paul was preaching Jesus, even though he had a kind of a bad reputation, and people didn't understand that he was really converted and wanted to believe in Jesus, but he just kept preaching Jesus and eventually started convincing people. And he kept preaching him even when people didn't want him to. They would tell him to stop, and he just kept doing it. And so the lesson for that is that we should also not be afraid to talk about Jesus and the things he's done for us. We have to remember, not everybody's going to like it. Not everyone's going to agree. Some people may not even think that we really believe. We can only show them through our actions. But God still calls us to tell what he has done for us in our lives, because he's changed every one of us. He's done wonderful things for us, and he wants us to tell other people about that. And we have to do that even if other people aren't going to like it, if they may not believe us. That's God's problem. God deals with other people's hearts. Our job is to tell others about him, just like Paul did. So I'm going to pray real quick, and we'll finish up. Dear Jesus, I thank you for this lesson today about learning how Paul preached you boldly wherever he went, and you gave him that strength and protection, Father. I pray that we would be like him and be willing to share your gospel to those around us in your name, so that we can tell more people about you. I pray for each of the children and families watching this video today, that you will just bless them this week, and that they will just be safe and healthy at home, and that you will just have your blessing on them. In your name I pray, amen. All right, well, so that's our story for today. Remember, you can email me at kids@mvucc.org. And remember to like, share, and subscribe our video here on our Mountain View Kids Fontana YouTube channel. So thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.